Hello, my little children. Welcome to our first lesson in APECON. We are learning about the 10 principles of economics. It's important we know these because we're going to make a lot of references throughout the not only micro, but macro. So what I would suggest is I gave you guys a notes copy on Google Classroom. I would have that available. It's really going to be helpful for you to be able to take notes. So if you have to pause the video right now, totally do, it's fine. And then follow along with me. All right. So in this chapter, we're going to look to answer these questions. Number one, what kinds of questions does economics address? What are the principles of how people make decisions? What are the principles how people interact? And what are the principles of how the economy works as a whole? All right. So what is economics all about? Well, it's the study of how society manages its scarce resources. So what is scarcity? The fact that things are limited. There's nothing unlimited anywhere. And don't say, love and friendship, just none of that garbage, okay? Everything is scarce that we can purchase, okay? Whether it's a desk, a pen, a haircut, an oil change, it's scarce. And economics studies how we manage those scarce resources. We look at how people decide what to buy, how much to work, how much to save, how much to spend, how businesses decide how much to produce, who to hire, and how society divides those resources for public goods like national defense and protecting the environment. All right, so the first group of principles is looking at, we're going to divide these 10 principles into 3 groups. The first group is how people make decisions personally. All right, so principle number 1, people face trade-offs. All decisions involve a trade-off. If you're trying to figure out, should I watch Netflix tonight or Outer Banks on Netflix, Pogue Life, or should I study for a test? Well, you're going to have a trade-off. If I go and watch Outer Banks tonight, which, by the way, John B is way better than JJ, I'm giving up getting maybe a good grade on a test. Or if I study, I give up knowing what happens next on Outer Banks. So you're always facing trade-offs. So you're doing one thing for another. So going to a party the night before your midterm leaves you less time for studying. Having more money to buy stuff makes you work longer hours, which means that you have less time to chill out. Protecting the environment, you're using stuff that could be used for other things. So, whoops, hang on. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened, and I don't know why I'm using an accent. So anyway, all right. So people face trade-offs. Society does too. The 2 trade-offs they have to think about is efficiency versus equality. Should we be more efficient where we're getting the most of our scarce resource, or should we be more equitable where we distribute our resources evenly among different members of societies? There is a trade-off. To achieve greater equality, you are going to redistribute income from the wealthy to the poor, but that reduces the incentive to try to get yourself out of poverty on your own. So that's something that we look at the big societal level about trade-offs. All right. Principle number 2, the cost of something is what you give up to get it. This is known as opportunity cost. It's whatever you give up in a decision. So when you make a decision, you need to look at the costs and benefits of the alternate choices, and then whatever decision you make is the cost. So if I'm deciding, do I get a burger for lunch or do I get a piece of pizza? If I get the burger, the opportunity cost is the pizza. It's the thing you give up when you make the decision. So here's some other examples that you guys are probably dealing with either now or going to be dealing with in the future, looking at colleges. So for instance, the opportunity cost of going to college for a year is not just the tuition, books and fees, but also the foregone wages. So if you go there, you're giving up money that your opportunity cost would be the money you could have been making working at a job. But then if you work at that job instead of going to college for a year, you're giving up all of the, your opportunity cost is getting that education. Seeing a movie is not just the price of the ticket, but the value of the time you spend in the theater. So if you see a good movie, your opportunity cost of, you could have hung out at home is a lot lower. But if it's a crap movie, the opportunity cost of staying at home would be really high. All right. Number 3, rational people think at the margin. I am going to use the word margin a lot in this class. Basically, rational people systematically and purposely do their best they can to achieve their objectives. They do the apps, they figure out what can I do to get the maximum results I want. So they make decisions by evaluating the costs and benefits of marginal changes, which are a marginal change is an incremental change, whether it's up or down to an existing plan. So some examples could be when a student considers whether to go to college for one more year, that marginal change, one more year, they're going to compare the fees and foregone wages to the extra income he would earn for an extra year of education. So if you, first, a lot of you, I'm sure you guys have heard of this, once you get your bachelor's degree, you could either go out in the workforce or spend one more year in college to get that master's degree. So while you're deciding what you want to do you need that one extra year? Will it make that big of a difference? I'll give you an example. When as a teacher, I got my bachelor's degree. Could I have gone back and got my master's in like administration or political science? Yeah, but it wasn't worth it to me because that extra expense I would have had would have been all the wages I would have been gone that I made my first year of teaching. So you have to think of things like that. I was using my rational thought that it wasn't that extra change, meaning that extra year of college wasn't worth it to me. Another thing, when a manager considers whether to increase output, they're going to compare the cost needed of labor. Should I hire one more person to work for me? Will it make me that much extra money? That's thinking at the margin. Thinking at the margin is, if I make this one change, will it benefit me for the better? If whether it's a change to maybe hire one more worker or fire a worker, that's an incremental change. That is thinking at the margin. If I do this one different thing, how much will it benefit me? That's thinking at the margin. And we think at the margin a lot in here. Principle number 4, people respond to incentives. Of course they do. And what are the incentives? Well, they can be boiled down to 2 things. Is it the carrot or the stick? It's just an analogy that people use when talking about incentives. If you're a donkey and you need to move that donkey, would you be more incentivized to get hit in the butt on a stick to move, or would you be more incentivized to move if you had a carrot dangling in front of you and you would move towards it to get it? So it can be reward or punishment. And rational people respond to incentives. So, for instance, when gas prices rise, consumers buy more hybrid cars and fewer gas guzzling SUVs. That's something that the government can do if they want to get rid of pollution. They might increase the price of gas with a tax so that people will want to buy more environmentally friendly cars or carpool. Again, that's us being incentivized by the government. Same with smoking. If they increase taxes on smoking, people will want to smoke less, and that's an incentive. Or if it's really quite simple. If sometimes I do this with you guys. I will do this with you guys. If you guys increase your grades from test to test, I give you guys treats, and COVID-friendly treats, of course. And that's an incentive for you. We all respond to incentives, whether they are rewards or punishments. All right, I'm going to skip this for now. I'm going to skip. If you want to do that on your own, here, you can pause it, try these. Here's the answers. You can pause it, but you don't have to, okay? You can pause that. It kind of tells you what it's about. All right, principle number 2. I apologize. The second group of principles are how people interact with one another. That has to do with economics too. Notice it's all about people. All right, number 5, trade can make everyone better off. This is one I talk about a lot too. I talk about all of these, but I refer a lot back to the thinking at the margin and trade making everyone better off. Rather than being self-sufficient, people can specialize in producing one good or service in exchange for another good. I'm going to be telling you this right now. If I was self-sufficient, I would be in deep trouble. I can't even sew a button onto a pair of pants. So the fact that I would have to like make my own clothes and do all that stuff, it's crazy. I actually saw the study one time. It was pretty cool, where this guy wanted to try to make his own BLT, being completely self-sufficient. So he got the stuff to like grow wheat, grow tomatoes, grow lettuce. He got a pig. You know what's going to happen to that pig. And it took him 6 months and cost him $1,600. Yeah. So not only is the cost time-wise not worth it, but it literally cost him $1,600 to make a sandwich he could have gone down the street and gotten for probably $4.99. So trade definitely makes us better off. Now, it's not just us as humans, but it's countries too as well that can benefit from trade and specialization, because then other places that could maybe grow something better, obviously don't have the climate to grow bananas, but other countries do. So they could grow them, and we get better prices and better quality stuff from other countries. So buying other goods more cheaply from abroad than they could be produced at home benefits everybody, because those other countries are making money because we're buying from them, and we benefit because we get the lower prices of these bananas, for instance, and better quality. Markets, principle 6, markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. Absolutely. A market is a group of buyers and sellers. They organize economic activity, determining what goods to produce, how much to produce of them, how much of each, how to produce them, how much of them to produce, and who gets them. So just understand that there's a market for every single product out there and service. So there's a market for oil changes. There's a market for cell phones. There's a market for soda or pop. Sorry, soda. That's ridiculous. A market to create clothes, a market to create American flags. And there's buyers and sellers in every one of those types of markets. We have what's known as, we follow a market economy, which is very similar to, just another way to say that is capitalism, where the allocated resources are not done by the government. The resources are traded by households and firms, or consumers and producers, and they make the market run. Adam Smith came up with this idea. Basically, there's like this invisible hand that pushes us to make a market run, and there's no government involved whatsoever. And we'll get more into that in chapter 2. So here's how the invisible hand works through the price system. So the interaction of buyers and sellers determines prices. If it's really simple. If you need gas and you have, what do you have in town? Casey's and Shell. And those are your two choices. And Casey's is selling at $2.19 a gallon and Shell is selling at $2.79. Well, when the buyers don't go to the Shell station because it's too expensive, what does the Shell station do? They lower the prices, and it's determined by that. It's determined because they want to have a business. And each price reflects the good's value to buyers and the cost of producing that good. So you got to find that happy medium, because of course producers want to sell at the highest price they can, but no, they can't, because we buyers need to make sure that it's what we're willing to pay or able to pay. So you got to find kind of that happy medium, which is what we're going to talk about in Unit 2. Prices guide self-interested households and firms to make decisions that in many cases maximize our well-being. You need to think about this. So cell phones are like a blessing and a curse, but more of a blessing, you have to say. And the quality, what you actually had, when, sorry to date myself, being 29 years old, I'm a little bit older than you. And when I first got my cell phone, it was, one where it's a flip phone and you just push the buttons to text. You have to push like the number 5 3 times to get the letter L, that kind of garbage. And we have now today, the cell phone can be a television. It can be anything. It can be, you could track your running with it. You can do, you name it, you can do it with your cell phone. It's because of businesses wanting our business so they can make money. And it's because of what we expect of quality that we get this and we have a better society. As a parent, cell phones, the great thing about them, I can make sure my kids are safe. I know where they're at. So it does help society's economic well-being. Think of medicine too. Oh my gosh, that's another one. Governments, Principle 7, governments can sometimes improve market outcomes. Of course, capitalism isn't the end all. It does have its flaws. Every economic system has its flaws. I like what Winston Churchill says. I'm paraphrasing, of course. He said that capitalism is the greatest economic or is the worst economic system except for all the others. So even though there are problems with capitalism, it is the best for creating, getting people out of poverty and creating a high standard of living that we've had today. But every now and then, like I said, it can be bad. So the government can step in. Now, the number one job that they do, of course, to protect us is enforcing property rights, making sure people can't just steal our stuff, including intellectual property rights with patents and copyrights. So what's the point of inventing something or wanting to if you can't get a copyright or patent for it, and then anyone can steal your idea and try to sell it? That doesn't incentivize us for anything. So like when you see like the pharmaceutical business, and sometimes we're like, whoa, those prices are outrageous, and it does stink, but if they didn't have patents to be able to monopolize on those higher prices for 7 years, we also wouldn't get those life-saving drugs, because what's the point of trying to make them if you know you can't make money off of it? So like I said, people are much less inclined to work, produce, invest, or purchase if they know their intellectual property or just their property itself is being stolen. I'll give you another example. In Chicago and in many places where we saw a lot of the looting over the summer, you see people that are looking to leave, businesses that are looking to leave because they are not inclined to invest or produce or even work in those areas when their property is constantly getting stolen. Another way they can get involved is to correct market failures. The two market failures that I'm looking at are bad externalities like pollution, or when there is a monopoly. Sometimes, the best example, the easiest example is the Gilded Age monopolies like Rockefeller, Carnegie, Ford, all of them, where Vanderbilt, where they have monopolies over certain industries, and the government stepped in and they're like, you can't do that. You're abusing that. That's called crony capitalism, and that's bad. Also getting involved, like with pollution, if these companies are just chugging out pollutants and it's making people sick, the government can step in and try to fix that. Usually the way they get rid of pollution is with taxes. Public policy could promote efficiency, but it can also promote equity. So if the market's distribution of economic well-being is not desirable, they can create those taxes to make it more equitable. All right. You can pause here, answer these questions. This is kind of like you looking at this in one way or another, and then I'd like to hear what you say later. But just pause this for now, kind of answer these questions. You can just answer them in your head. I'm curious what you guys think. All right, moving on. The third group is how the economy works as a whole. This is going to be more macro stuff, but I'm going to still talk about it today. We'll definitely get more into this in the spring. A country's standard of living depends on its ability to produce goods and services. So there's huge variation in living standards across the country and over time. Obviously, there's rich countries and there's poor countries. And our standard of living, we have the richest country in the world when it comes to GDP. We have the highest GDP in the world. And that's because we have a high standard of living. It's 8 times larger than it was 100 years ago. So it's even higher just by our own standards. Because we are able to produce a variety of goods and services that are of high quality and value. So the most important determinant of living standards is productivity, the amount of goods and services produced per unit of labor. So the more productive an economy, the more productive people are and what they're producing makes them and our standards of living much better. So productivity, what does it depend on? It depends on our capital, the equipment, like the quality of it, skills, which is our, when we get educated, the more educated we are, the better product, more productive we are, and the technology that we are using to make ourselves more productive. Just me recording these alone, these videos for you alone, that using that technology and using my knowledge of economics, it kind of streamlines this and can be available not only to you but anybody who wants it, which can make them more educated, which can make them more productive in society. Some factors that people assume affect living standards, like labor unions and competition from abroad, don't necessarily affect living standard as much as productivity does. That's the number one, hands down. The more productive we are, the better standard of living we have. This one's about inflation. Principle 9, prices rise when the government prints too much money. Well, yeah. A lot of people are like, oh, why don't we just print more money and get us out of debt? Because it goes along with like the water versus diamonds theory. Why is water cheap? Because it's everywhere. It's easy to get. Why are diamonds expensive? Because they're rare. The less of something there is, the more valuable it is. The more of something there is, the less valuable it is. In Germany during the 1920s, when they owed all that reparation money to France and Britain for World War I, they just started printing their currency. And they printed so much, it was completely devalued, like bad, to the point where people were burning it instead of logs because it was less valuable than a log. People were literally taking wheelbarrows of money to a grocery store to buy a loaf of bread because it was that devalued. So if you don't want to print too much money because then it loses its value. Principle 10, society faces a short-run trade-off between inflation and unemployment. So in the short run, if you have higher prices, you tend to have low unemployment. But if you have low prices, deflation, that's when you have high unemployment. So inflation can be bad, but deflation is very, very bad because deflation means people are out of the job. So we saw deflation with COVID. I mean, for sure, because all of a sudden, like prices, were super low on like travel. You could fly somewhere for like $20, or you saw prices drop for gasoline and stuff, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so great, but it's really bad because we have millions and millions of people out the job. So basically, just so you know, if you have high prices, you're going to have low employment, but if you have low prices, lots of people are out the job. All right. So in summary, the principles of decision making are, as we saw, those are the first four, here are the next four, next three, and the last three. And they're divided according to those three categories. Okay. I know this was a long one. It's usually not necessarily this long, but I just wanted to go over all this at the same time. Make sure you fill out that chart so that you guys can have a reference point to go back to throughout the semester. Other than that, I'm done. I'll talk to you guys later.